Ladies and gentlemen, once again, welcome. I wish to start by thanking you for attending this meeting. I'm very pleased to present this webinar on protection of intellectual property in Morocco. This webinar is essentially aimed to small and medium companies as well as entrepreneurs from Morocco and from Europe as well. My name is Ibon Omar Zabal. I work for the project management office within the EU IPU, the European Union and IP office. Now, this is also organized within the framework of Africa IP. This is also to be considered within the framework of the Africa IP SME Helpdesk, which deals in particular with SMEs in Africa. It is a free service which has been set up for African and European SMEs and entrepreneurs. This is what the Africa IP SME Helpdesk is all about. The idea is to make people become actually aware of intangible assets and the protection of these intangible assets. It is really important. It is a sort of Pan-African protection, Pan-African-wide protection which is offered, but we will focus on Morocco today. This project has been developed by the European Commission, but it is also managed by EU IPO and the AFRIP program. Indeed, we focus on intellectual property protection in all African countries in this framework. Now, regarding today's session, the idea is to enable some representatives from companies or the owner of companies in Morocco to be able to make some more informed decisions. And the idea is to know more about the protection of IP in Morocco. This webinar will also focus on similarities and convergence between the Moroccan system regarding IP protection and the system which applies in the European Union. It is very important for companies that are already involved in Morocco who wish to develop their activities in Morocco. And of course, it is important to become acquainted with the Moroccan legislation to know how it works, and also, generally speaking, how things are organized.
Représentants, mais 3 représentants aussi de l'Office marocain.
There will be 3 representatives of the Moroccan office on IP, Mrs. Naima Benarmi, who is head of the MARC service. She has been working within OMPIC, the Moroccan IP and trade office, for the past 19 years. She is well acquainted with trademarks. She is well acquainted with marketing issues. She's also in charge of international development and other services. Still representing OMPIC, Mrs. Mohamed Ami, who is in charge of technological transfer within OMPIC. She is responsible for the implementation of strategy that will actually foster cooperation with universities and or amongst universities. Then Mrs. Raja Samer, she is a legal advisor. She also works with OMPIC since 2012. And she works with the Department of Legal Cooperation, and she is very interested in the follow-up of services on this in this area. So welcome to all, and thank you very much. I also wish to mention that we thank the INPI colleague, Mr. François Kaiser, from the National Institute of Intellectual Property or Industrial Property. He actually, he's been working for 12 years in the field of intellectual properties. He's a graduate of the École nationale d'arts et métiers, and he is registered on the list of French patent attorneys. He's been working with INPI since 2012, but since September 2021, he has joined the international network of the French Embassy in Morocco, and he is responsible for intellectual property issues in the Maghreb region, that is Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia. So thank you very much to Mr. François Kaiser for participating. And without further ado, let me give the floor to the representatives of OMPIC. And please, whenever you wish, use the chat or, well, use the chat if you wish to ask some questions, if you want to share certain things with others. Do not hesitate. Mrs. Naima, I believe you are the first speaker. And as I said, without further ado, I will give you the floor. You have the floor, Madame. Good morning to all. I am very happy to share some information concerning intellectual property. I will focus on trademarks as well as on brands and designs. Unfortunately, I only have 10 minutes. I will talk about issues relating to filing. I will talk about brands and designs. I will actually provide you with some figures regarding the possibilities of actually filing for brands and designs at industrial level. Let me start by actually define intellectual property. What is it? Within OMPIC, we deal with technical innovations, that is patent, innovative patent, aesthetic creations, designs, and as I said, obviously, issues relating to geographical indications and designation of origin. We're talking about industrial brands and designs, and I will talk about the fact that industrial property managed by OMPIC is in line with international standards, Law 1797. What are the advantages of intellectual property? You may have a monopoly of exploitation. You will stay ahead of the game and increase your revenue, and you will increase the commercial value of your creation. Now, of course, nobody has the right to exploit your creation without your authorization. The protection confers rights which can be assigned or transferred according to a license to another company, and the protection enables you to develop a positive image of your company. The trademark, trade name or service mark is a sign which is there and can represent you and actually characterize your services to that of a natural person or legal entity. The trademark is protected for products and or specific services. They are classified according to the NICE classification. Now, what functions of the trademark? Well, differentiate you from your competitors, you stay ahead, enables you to distinguish your products and services for the consumers. There is an indication of source, of origin, the communication, a lifestyle, an image, and of course, advertisement. Now, the trademark is organized around territoriality. That's very important. The trademark is protected only in the country where protection is requested. And of course, the conditions for filing are determined by the national legislation of any country. For Morocco, it's the legislation 1797 relating to IP protection. The principle of specialty. Now, here, the trademark is protected with regard to a specific activity sector. These activity sectors are classified according to the NICE classification, the international classification, and you could see there were quite a number of services. The trademark can be mixed, denominative, or figurative. These are, of course, trademarks from OMPIC. We protect our trademarks, of course. We have a tri-dimensional trademark. It could be the shape of a tea box or a soap box. We have different trademarks, sound, the sound trademark, that of Netflix. As soon as you hear that sound, you know that it is Netflix starting. The olfactory trademark exists as well, but so far we've had no filing for an olfactory or scent trademark. The different categories of marks, of course, it can we can have collective trademarks when it's exploited by any person respecting the usual regulation by the holder of the registration. You also have so-called collective trademark of certification. This applies to a product or service which presents specific properties. Now, a collective certification trademark can only be filed by the relevant person, of course. The protection of the trademark in time, there is a period of 10 years that can be renewed. I mentioned territoriality. Of course, there is a scope for this protection, and the national filing confers territorial protection at the country level. In case of international protection, you can go further. Now, if you want to file a trademark, you have to respect some criteria. The trademark must be distinctive. It cannot be the necessary designation or generic designation or usual designation for the service product. It cannot be descriptive of a characteristic, for example, that it is not unbreakable. And generally speaking, it's very important to choose precisely the distinctive trademark. You cannot actually be misleading if, for example, you indicate made in Morocco, whereas there's nothing Moroccan, or write that this is leather, whereas it's not leather, or actually, if we're talking about some coffee replacement product. As I mentioned, it should be a fair description and it cannot actually hinder public order or general respect. The trademark must be available. Of course, it has to respect the law applicable in a given territory. Now, how can we actually protect the trademark at national level? In Morocco, you have three filing possibilities at the OMPIC headquarters or through a regional office. But in fact, over 85% of the trademarks are actually filed online. It's much faster and it's very sure. Now, what is the process? If you actually apply for filing of a given trademark, your request will be observed, will be studied, reviewed. If it is abiding by the general rules, we will actually await a few weeks, and very soon, if there is no objection, we can actually register the trademark, and then it is registered for 10 years, and this period can be renewed without any problem. We mentioned earlier the territoriality of brand. Now, of course, if you wish to submit a request, You can do it at national level, you can do it regional level. You go through the regional office for member countries that are part of a regional system, EU IPO or OAPI, and an international way is also there via WIPO, the Madrid system, where only one application enables you to have access to 130 countries. The protection of a trademark in Morocco for a foreign country can be done through the system. What are the advantages of protection through Madrid system? This is being managed by the World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO. Now, one application only, one language, one currency, and one registration only, and a simplified management, which is really important. Let us now move actually to the industrial brands and designs. Here, what is an industrial brand and design? It's the ornamental or aesthetic of a given product. It can be bidimensional or tridimensional. The assembly of lines, the colors. We have a few examples that have been filed in Morocco, or three-dimensional. It can be the shape or the surface of a product, i.e. design is really very important. And of course, the design will guide the buyer. And whenever the design is something which is appealing, is seducing, the consumer will actually choose amongst identical products depending on the design, and design is really important and secure the product's future. For the industrial brands and designs, there are different criteria. For example, the novelty is really important. Obviously, the same design should not be used by another product, and also what we call the individual trait. It should certainly not give you an impression of déjà vu. So, as I meant, how to protect the industrial brand and design at national level. You have different possibility. The national approach, you go to the headquarters or you do it online with direct OMPIC.me, and you also have a space of services. Now, here, in fact, the difference with the trademark is that once you have been registered, you have 5 years validity, which is renewable 5 times, therefore a maximum of 25 years. Now, contrary to trademark, the production of industrial brands and designs is limited to 25 years. As I said, for trademarks, you have no limit in time. The same in terms of territorial protection. If you wish to protect a brand or design, you have to apply in the relevant countries. And as to the filing, once again, the company can submit its application to the OMPIC directly. Now here, we're not using the Madrid system, we're using the Hague system with one application only and one currency, etc., and 96 countries will be covered. If you want to protect your brand in Morocco, you can do things as presented. In fact, there are many similarities between trademarks, registration, and industrial brands and designs. Let me end with a few figures. In 2022, we have received 16,587 application for filing. That's industrial, that meant for Moroccan requests, but also for foreign applications. For industrial brands and designs, you saw the figures. And here we have made a distinction for foreign companies which have gone through the Madrid system. In 2022, we've received 4,282 for trademarks, for brands and designs. For the Hague system in 2022, 305 applications for filings. And you can see that here through the Hague system, we've had much more requests, much more applications. So this was a summary of the differences concerning applications for the brands and designs and trademark. Thank you very much, Mrs. Marchette. I believe that your colleague will now continue.
Vous êtes certainement Monsieur Mohamed Bami.
Mr. Mohamed Bami. Good morning. I work at the Technology Transfer Department at OMPIC, and let me start with a few information on the patent system in Morocco. Since December 18th, 2014, we have a new legal framework with Law 1797 amended and supplemented by Law 2313. We went from a registration system to an examination system. So OMPIC examines all requests for patents and all patentability criteria such as novelty, the inventive steps and industrial application. So the applicant has then the opportunity to react or to amend the claims and issue observations. And on this basis, then the patent is granted or the application is rejected. And the motivation for rejection would be exception, patentability criteria, exclusion, as well as a novelty or industrial application. So there are three ways in Morocco for your filing, either direct filing or a phased entry on the market through the PCT or through the validation with the European Patent Office. So on this diagram, you can see the whole procedure for filing patent application in Morocco. So there's first of all an administrative examination to see if everything is the way it should be. And then we have a search report with opinion on patentability, which is established by the examiner, and it's all then notified to the applicant. And this applicant then has 3 months to either file observations, an F or other remarks, and 18 months after the filing, the filing is published, and then there are an additional 4 months to file an observation. It all ends up with a definitive opinion, either with the granting of the patent or its rejection. And the applicant then has an additional 2 months to file observations. OMPIC, in its mission to promote the importance of industrial property and its mission to support SMEs in protecting their intellectual property rights, has additional added value services. So we have search reports, for instance, that have a very substantial and customized analysis of patent information. And I believe we also have a very clear response to strategic information needs for informed decision making. We have 2 types of servicing. We have IP pre-diagnosis and search reports. So let's talk about pre-diagnosis. So first of all, OMPIC wants to demystify industrial property for companies and assess the company's IP situation to start with. Then there are 4 pillars in this assessment: management, exploitation of, notably of intellectual property. And experts of OMPIC, whether it is for trademarks or industrial designs, go on the field, see the company, talk to the managers, and establish a confidential report with customized recommendations adapted to the company's specific requirement. And I believe it is quite important to know that we use a very useful tool by the Luxembourg office, so-called IDA diagnostic. And this allows us to generate graphs that really position the company in terms of the exploitation of industrial property. We also generate patent mapping graphs, and we use the Orbit Questel tool to produce them. So other high added value services are the prior art search reports and the state of art search. And these allow us to have an expert opinion on the novelty and the inventive steps of industrial application of a patent. And the research into the state of the art makes it possible to drop an inventory of the relevant prior art for a specific technology. And then we have the information report on the legal status of patents. And this makes it possible to identify patents relating to a specific product or process that were previously filed on Moroccan territory. And this fits within the framework of the freedom of exploitation in Morocco. And we also have a specific report on technological trends. And this report gives a kind of mapping of the major technological trends within a specific technical field. So for instance, you can have graphs on potential markets for a specific technology, how many applicants there are, potential markets, technological evolution, legal status, etc. And this report is established thanks to the Orbit Quest tool. Finally, what are the different final steps? Well, we have direct filing at OMPIC, and then we have for the pre-diagnosis, the email address you see on the screen, prediagnostic@ompic.ma. Most of the beneficiaries would be SMEs, universities, research centers, natural persons, etc. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Mr. Bami. I believe we will now give the floor to Mr. Raja Saber. To Mrs. Raja Saber, apologies. So without further ado, I will say a few words about the various services offered by OMPIC. And for users of industrial and commercial property, and to potential users of industrial property. So we have here quite a few different kinds of services. First of all, we have e-procedures. So here we have online platforms that were developed by our office in order to allow our users to make the best possible use of the various IPC tools put at their disposal, especially the ones that were just presented by my colleagues, Mrs. Alami and Mr. Bami. So obviously ensuring the protection of industrial property titles Also, when it comes to setting up a new business, we need information, whether it is in industrial property information or business creation information. So we need information coming from our central register of commerce. And this is at the very core of our mission, at least our information mission. So for these three larger families, so e-procedures, e-information, and e-training, we have various procedures that are directly linked to these e-procedures. You could, for instance, ask for IP title, for a renewal of such a title, or for specific informations on filing or training. As for filing and renewal procedures, we have one specific platform called Direct OMPIC. So you could either file a trademark, renew it. It is also valid for industrial designs and patents. It is very user-friendly, actually. It's when it comes to patents, it allows to pay the annual fees to keep the patent. And there is one additional service that, in my opinion, is extremely interesting, which is called e-datage. And this allows the user to assign a definite date to a creation, to an ID or a concept that obviously has to be covered by the intellectual property regime, but that has not yet been finalized. So this allows the holder of this idea to attribute a specific date to that idea before entering into the whole filing procedure. And the user could then use this specific date as a proof of anteriority, should this ever be questioned in the future. So to say a few words now on step 2 of this procedure, what is important to know here is that the office holds the central registry or commerce. So we have one platform called Direct Entreprise, which allows to create businesses and to go through all the various steps of the procedure. In Rabat, we are using it in its pilot phase right now. But what is interesting here is that it has a component on negative certificates, and this has already started to be operational since 2021. It's a 100% digital procedure, which allows the user to ask for a commercial name or a negative certificate through the platform. And the user can do it in a very user-friendly way, in a very simple and rapid way. And so all of the whole procedure can be done quite easily online. And that is quite interesting. So in terms of access to information, we have another platform called Direct Info. The user of intellectual industrial property can have a very user-friendly and direct access to financial and legal information on businesses. You have the opportunity to enter a few search criteria and get information in various formats. You can have simplified or very detailed information, but also status and the minutes of the various businesses. So in terms of access to information, OMPIC gives the user of industrial property various search engines that have different criteria. And here the user can search the various databases and various IP registers. And especially in the Central Registry of Commerce, because this will allow ID holders to check whether their idea or the project they wish to protect has not yet been protected, and so avoid for their application to be rejected. We also have the PIC barometer. This is quite interesting because it's a goldmine of statistics, which allows you to have really specific information on trade, on industrial property. And here again, you have different criteria and search criteria you can use. And you can have statistics by industry, by city, by region, by legal form of commercial entities, etc. So this specific tool gives us really in-depth information on the economic situation of business, or on the IP situation of specific industries and businesses. As for the third pillar of our services, we have the e-training platform. So OMPIC has a training academy, the Moroccan Academy for Industrial and Commercial Property. And there's a vast array of classes here, of training modules, and OMPIC allows users to either follow their training modules online or in person. So our e-learning platform is called AMAPIC, and this is a specific platform we use for online training. Now, to go back to our information pillar, we have a mobile interface that is available both in Arabic and French, and has a is very easily accessible through for users, and allows them to have direct access to the digital platforms of OMPIC. So what about the presence of OMPIC on the territory, especially at local level? Obviously, our first mission is to be able to make local services available to the various users of industrial property in Morocco. We do so through various partnerships with local stakeholders. So now we go through the 12 chambers of commerce and industry and services in Morocco. They are already operational, and they are able to make various types of services available, notably in terms of negative reports, especially for people who cannot use our online platforms. And this is also true for trademarks, for designs, and for all their request of information and data from the Central Registry of Commerce. I would like to highlight that these various platforms are obviously available 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And OMPIC also makes client center available to all users. So should they have any questions, complaints, or should they just wish to communicate with OMPIC? And here we have qualified, trained people who answer this question, and these questions can be relayed to us either via mail, via email, or a specific web application called e-réclamation. So here are the various phone numbers of OMPIC should anyone want to follow up and ask you us questions or make observations. So obviously we are more than happy to answer any of your questions, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Grand merci, Madame Saver. Je vois même aussi votre coordonnée.
Thank you very much, Madame Saber. We can see your email address here and other details. There are certainly a lot of questions, but maybe the questions could be postponed until the end of the seminar. The moment has come to give the floor to our colleague François Kaiser, who represents INPI, the National Institute of Intellectual Property. So maybe Mr. Kaiser could also actually share his screen. Okay, let me do that. Thank you, François, for your patience, and many thanks to our colleagues from OMPIC. They have highlighted the great number of services that are available for our companies. So, François, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Yvonne, for this presentation. I'd like to thank EU OPI for the organization of this webinar, as well as Africa IP, with which I like to work a lot. And of course, I wish to thank our colleagues from OMPIC, OMPIC, who have made some very interesting presentations. Now, I'm going to give you some information regarding possibly more the potential applicants from Europe by giving them some information about the macroeconomic situation of Morocco. And this will maybe help SMEs from Europe to see what they can do in Morocco and how they can develop their activities. Now, this will be very short, of course. We've already had a presentation from OMPIC. We'll talk about how to actually obtain the authorization in Morocco and the subtleties or the differences between actually obtaining the rights. I will say a few words about counterfeiting in Morocco. I will certainly talk about the exploitation of rights, of IP rights in Morocco. And of course, I will end with a series of recommendations. Now, let me start with some figures, some key figures regarding the macroeconomic situation of the Moroccan market. Morocco has a population which is on the increase at the moment, 38 million people in 2022. The projections are that by 2050, there may be 42 million inhabitants. Generally speaking, we have very good trade between the EU and Morocco. In fact, the EU is the #1 trade partner. We have trade for a value of 53 billion and 8 billion for trade and services. The population is very young, with an average age of 30. This young population will mean that there are going to be rapid changes, and these young people are actually very well trained. They speak several languages, and they can certainly be the perfect partner, trade partner with the EU. Now, in terms of trade, the trade relations is based on the Euro-Mediterranean agreement between the EU and Morocco. So this is an association agreement between the EU and Morocco. I believe that was signed in the year 2000. And certain aspects were ended by 2012, but of course this means that quite a lot of customs duties are no longer applied on certain products. And we believe that we can expect that the customs duties will be reduced in the future with Morocco. Now, Morocco is also working in order to have a free trade agreement with the EU. And let us speak frankly, at the moment, things are a little bit in a deadlock, but I believe that things will resume very, very soon. There is also so-called informal or unofficial economy in Morocco, which is quite important. It represents about 30% of the GDP. Now, this informal economy is actually reducing at the moment or dropping, but it still is very present. And of course, in the Moroccan kingdom, we have 93% of small and medium companies. These are located along the Atlantic coast between Tangiers and north of the country and Casablanca. Right. I just wanted to highlight the Global Innovation Index classification. Global Innovation Index is a tool which was created in 2007 and which measures the capacities and performances relating to innovation of this concerns 130 countries. There are 20 qualitative and quantitative criterion. And according to these criterions, Morocco is ranked 67th, and it actually has improved its situation by 10 places in the last year. So in other words, what it means is that it's really good, and this is true also about tangible and intangible assets. So generally speaking, I believe Morocco has fully understood the importance of protecting intellectual property, and certainly Morocco can be proud of this, and please do call upon the information that was just presented by our colleagues from OMPIC. Just to conclude on Morocco, in view of the geographical position of Morocco, in fact, Morocco is a sort of hub between the European Union and Sub-Saharan Africa. And since the pandemic, which we experienced over the past few years, we have actually observed that the value chains in Morocco have been revamped and upgraded, and certainly there are some possibilities to develop further for European entrepreneurs and companies. Let me briefly present you the Moroccan office, OMPIC. I will summarize, of course, because our colleagues from OMPIC have already said a few words, but they were very modest. They didn't tell us that in Morocco, you truly have a reference office. Now, you have seen how many services are being proposed, the fact that there is actually that the office has digitalized, and we truly have a top quality office. It is actually under the Ministry of Trade. And of course, this office is actually being funded through different taxes relating to intellectual property and the different aspects. In other words, Morocco has truly made the right decisions. And recently, the Ministry of the Industry in Morocco has actually indicated that they now have, through this OMPIC office, a true lever. They have the means to leverage. They certainly will take advantage of your creations thanks to their training courses, etc. It will be very useful. Now, as far as the procedures are concerned, you heard the representatives of OMPIC that there is a wide variety of possibilities. And of course, OMPIC is part of the PCT, of the Hague arrangement, of the Madrid system, etc. And in Morocco, the legislation is very similar to the French legislation and generally speaking to the EU legislation. So there is indeed convergence and it makes things easier for European organizations. They can very easily adapt to the Moroccan legislation. Now, of course, there are some differences and maybe we can speak later about the patent procedure or the trademark procedure, but let us highlight the so-called opposition procedure, which also exists within the WIPO context. Now, it is one of the rare African offices which has an opposition procedure. The mediators are well trained regarding the different types or processes regarding opposition. So this is really well developed. Finally, the Moroccan office is not just a registration office, which is true for other offices. Here, there is truly a search of the novelty activity. Now, this is really specific to the Moroccan office. For example, in Morocco, they started searching the novelty activity before the French office ever did that. Then, as far as the patents are concerned, there are different stages for the validation. And as far as brands and designs are concerned, we're on a par with international standards. I will not go into details. As to the missions of OMPIC, of course, we have a sort of sovereign mission, i.e. to issue intellectual property rights, etc. Another mission is that of supporting companies. We mentioned the fact that there is some support to the companies and, of course, public service remit. Now, I will not go into details concerning applications or filing of patents in Morocco. Most of these applications for filing come from abroad, but we also see that there is an increase in the national applications for filing, which means that investors in Morocco have actually been very resilient during the health crisis, and we observe in the past few months that there is an increase in applications for filing a patent. So, as I said, most of the patent come from abroad, and the majority of these foreign applications follow the so-called validation procedure. Now, who or what are the applicant countries? United States of America, France, Switzerland, Germany, Italy, Spain. Essentially speaking, European countries are well placed. Morocco is a country where we know that most patents concern pharmaceutical products or organic chemistry and biotechnology. And what we note is that those are the main technological areas. As far as national applications are concerned, they usually come from research centers or universities. You must know that Moroccan universities are developing very fast. There are 7 Moroccan universities in the top 1,000 universities worldwide. And the process is on the increase with Center of Excellence being created. The Mohammed VI Polytechnics has been created recently or is near Marrakesh, and it's a major partner regarding the development of various inventions. I would also like to suggest that you visit the OMPIC website. It's really interesting. You will see different database for brands, for designs, for trademarks. The access is free. Now, to give you an idea of the cost for obtaining a patent in Morocco, it will be about 300 euros for an SME. So there is a special cost for SMEs. This does not, of course, cover the cost of so-called representation of. So what it means is that if you haven't got some address in Morocco or representation, you will need to actually ask a representative who will be actually accredited by WIPO and who will represent you in Morocco. We can come back to that representation later. And finally, regarding patents in Morocco, I'd like to mention an initiative which was actually set up only a few months ago. It's called IP Marketplace. And here you can see the link at the bottom. It's a very interesting link. I thought this might be useful, and therefore I share this address with you. You will find a database which is free with information that is free of rights on the Moroccan territory. In other words, you can actually consult this. It's you don't have to pay royalties. There are also technological offers. For instance, if you have a patent that is valid for the Moroccan territory, and if because of financial difficulties or human resources difficulties, you do not wish to exploit that patent yourself, you can actually offer this this patent to actually be exploited by a third party well, obviously against payment of some license fee or by actually purchasing that. Now, if you have a technology and if there is a tender in Morocco, you could actually be able to apply for partnership with Moroccan companies, either private or public, and this will enable you, therefore, to work in certain areas. For instance, water treatment, water recycling. There, you know that water is very important in Morocco, and new technologies regarding water are certainly being searched. Now, I just wanted to mention that, or waste recycling, for example. So anyway, just a last word on patents. There are different strategies if you wish to obtain a patent in Morocco. Let me develop this slightly. As far as European SMEs are concerned, well, first of all, you file with the national office, whether French or Spanish or German, and once you have filed an application, you can request an extension under a priority. You have a 12-month period. If you go for the Moroccan territory, you have the national approach, which means that you immediately submit an application in Morocco to OMPIC, and there will be an approach, or there will be a traditional review via OMPIC. You can go for the European Patent Office, the EPO. You must know that for the past 12 months, there is a validation of the European patent by the Moroccan authority. So Morocco is the first country actually to validate the European patent. If you pay the validation tax in Morocco, your European patent will have the same importance as if it had been actually registered with Morocco, with the OMPIC. Or you go through the international path, the PCT, and if you go via an international approach, Morocco will check how it has been done. So these are the three different strategies you can actually implement. And there's one specificity regarding French SMEs. You must know that according to the French procedure, generally speaking, you cannot choose France directly via the PCT meeting, whereas in Morocco, you can do it. If you go for the PCT approach and you're a French company, then you actually have to go through the French procedure first before going through the PCT procedure. I just want to highlight that. Now, as far as the national approach is concerned, for European countries, you can either decide on the national procedure first and then the international procedure, i.e. PCT. But let me just refer to possible national defense issues that may come into the picture. For example, in France, a French national must actually inform the national ministry that it intends to actually file an application abroad before filing it in France. And the Défense, the Ministry of Defense, will decide whether that patent should remain in the French territory or is entitled to be dealt with at international level immediately. So I suggest that you verify in your country what is possible or not.
The one specific case, and this is probably useful for Spanish SMEs, you should know that a few years ago, Morocco has signed a patent prosecution highway, and this will make the getting Spanish patent in Morocco and vice versa is easier. Because both offices will have their work recognized by this agreement. So if you have any question on this new opportunities, do not hesitate to contact me or to contact the OMPIC. So what about trademarks now? Obviously, I'm not going to go back into the detail of the matter since we have already mentioned everything, but let me give you a few information nonetheless. So most of the filings are done via the Madrid system, which is probably the easiest system right now. And most of these applications concerned semi-figurative trademarks. So it's either a word mark with a logo and associated with a figurative trademark. What are the main designated classes? We have class 3, cosmetics, class 30, foodstuffs of plant origin, or class 5, pharmaceutical products. As I mentioned before, OMPIC has an opposition procedure, of course, and I believe you should monitor filings in Morocco and, if the need arises, to use this opportunity to file an opposition. So Morocco does not have an annulment procedure or procedure for lapsed patents, unlike European countries. So European countries need to file an administrative procedure for annulment, or in the case of lapsed trademark. So for European offices, there is this possibility to have a lapse or an annulment procedure. It is an administrative procedure, and this procedure does not yet exist in Morocco, and it is possible that it might be introduced in Morocco in the next few years. I don't know much about that yet. So I know the OMPIC has very nicely talked about the various types of trademarks that can be filed in Morocco. And obviously, what is important here is that the trademark needs to be very clearly represented, needs to be easily accessible on the long term. And this is why we haven't had any olfactive or gustative marks, trademarks so far, because it is quite complicated to have a long-term and easily accessible representation for this type of trademarks. On the other hand, at European level, there are quite a few offices that allow to file uh, audio trademarks or multimedia trademarks through filing an MP3 or MP4 file. And this is not yet possible in Morocco. So, as I said, it is possible at European level, not yet in Morocco. What about fees? We are, as of now, we're around 120 euros for a small or medium enterprise. I am sure that you are quite familiar with the diagram on the screen. So at the international level, we have the Madrid system. So you file an application and your office of origin, and WIPO will then reallocate those various trademarks and the various offices of the contracting parties that were designated. In our case, it would be OMPIC, for instance. After that, there will be review on the grounds, etc. So I know that we have only a few minutes left. So I will go straight to the exploitation of these IP rights. So we saw how to actually become the holder of these rights. Let's see how we can exploit them and what might be the obstacles to the exploitation of industrial property rights in Morocco. Well, for quite a few years now, Morocco has tackled counterfeiting. I know that public authorities, or whether there are judicial or customs authority, have really stepped up their effort to fight counterfeiting. So in a few words, we have a few figures here that I took from a study that was carried out about 10 years ago and which should be updated in the next few months by the Moroccan office. So what you can see on the screen is that counterfeiting cost Morocco millions of dirhams. And most of these counterfeit goods are actually manufactured outside of Morocco and imported into Morocco, or they might be imported unbranded, for instance, and some labeling is then added on the product in Morocco. So what about legal action? You can have both civil or criminal legal action. It can go anywhere from 2 to 6 months imprisonment and or a fine that goes from 50,000 to 500,000 dirhams, which which is not really a very high fine. So some people who import counterfeit goods think they can get away with it quite easily. And let's not forget that counterfeiting in general, I mean, around the world, is not sufficiently punished. And criminal networks would rather deal with counterfeit goods than weapons, for instance, because they know that they're not risking much in the end if they choose counterfeit goods over weapons, whereas they can make quite a lot of money from it. So I will not go into the detail here. You know that many softwares or um, artistic productions are counterfeit, and you as and your businesses will sooner or later have to deal with counterfeit goods. So it is extremely important that the movements of counterfeit goods are constantly monitored by Moroccan authorities. So if you are the holder of a trademark in Morocco, and you can now, and since 2021, you can do it online. You can only do it online, actually. You can ask for the suspension of release of free circulation of goods online. You can tell Moroccan customs that you are the holder of a specific trademark, and you can ask them to check a specific container that might contain counterfeit goods. So more than 700,000 products have been stopped from entering the market every year. I mean, you can see the year 2020 has seen a peak really because people were mostly ordering products and goods over the internet. And now we've come back to a relatively stable figure. I believe that the level of counterfeit goods should stay about the same for the next few years. So that was for customs. What about legal actions? As I said, this study dates back a few years, but should be updated within the year. So we have about 600 counterfeiting cases in over the period 2008-2011. And mostly these cases were heard by commercial courts in Tangier, Agadir, but Casablanca still accounts for most of legal proceedings and counterfeiting. So there is no specific jurisdiction for industrial property, but Casablanca court, which, as I said, accounts for most of legal proceedings, is specifically competent in this area. So as you can see, the average time taken to reach a judgment is quite reasonable. We're at 18 months right now. So this is what I had to say on the exploitation of industrial property rights. To conclude, let me share with you a few recommendations for European SMEs. So my first recommendation would be monitor. I could not stress it enough. As I said earlier, OMPIC databases are free and freely accessible as well. And there are a very exhaustive and comprehensive database which would allow you to check patentability, the availability of your trademark, but also allows you to identify competitors or partners on the same market in order to be able to develop your activities on Moroccan territory. This monitoring protects against fraudulent filings as well, or to file an opposition if a trademark that is similar to yours is filed at a given moment. And what is quite important, it will allow you to establish the freedom of exploitation of your invention. So you can check that if you want to exploit your invention, you are not infringing upon someone else's IP rights. So if you need to file an opposition procedure against the fraudulent filing of a similar trademarks to use, you need to do it. We do not have an amendment procedure or a lapse procedure. So if you need to do that, you need to go through court. It's very long. It will cost you a lot of money. So this is why you should be really careful right from the start. So if your headquarters are not in Morocco, you will need to use the services of a professional representative. And professional representatives is a very regulated profession in Morocco. So OMPIC has a list of these representatives, and this list is very easily accessible on the OMPIC website, and you can contact a representative who will then help you in filing for a trademark application in Morocco. So it is very important to ask for the suspension of release for free circulation of goods suspected of being counterfeit. As I said, this procedure was made quite easy in the last few years because it can entirely be done online now. So once you have talked with your professional representative, you can set up a strategy, and you could consider filing a translation or transliteration of your trademarks. So that's a specific strategy, and you have to check back with your representative or your legal department. Um, it is also quite important to maintain good management of your IP portfolio, and you really need to file any modification, such as a license registration, assignments, etc. So you have to be the holder in order to file an opposition procedure, for instance. So this is why it is so important to, once again, um, alert OMPIC to any assignment, name changes, etc., so that if you need to file an opposition procedure, you are legally able to do so. It is also in your own interest to be able to identify local reliable partners. It is so much easier in Morocco to work with locals, and this would really help with market surveillance. There's one last point that I would like to highlight. If you start negotiating with a partner, you need to have them sign NDAs, because we have seen, and this is not specific to Morocco, but we have seen that very often 80% of counterfeiting and unfair competition comes from partners. So mostly local partners with whom you might have been working very well for the first 3-4 years of your relationship, and who might at that point start producing counterfeit goods of your products, the products you wish to import into Morocco. So this is why it is extremely important to have a legal basis, contracts and agreement with them before you start this partnership. So by way of conclusion, I believe that the main takeaways here is that it is easier to obtain IP rights than to exploit them. OMPIC is an extremely competent office. So unfortunately, counterfeiting is still a very present issue, which really sometimes might even discourage foreign direct investment. But I really encourage you, nevertheless, to invest in this wonderful country and very, very promising country that is Morocco. If you have any question concerning industrial property in Morocco, please do not hesitate to contact me. Thank you so much, François. I have noted all the similarities and the differences between the various systems, and I have really appreciated the modesty that you highlighted at the beginning. Because very often it is true that our OMPI colleagues do not uh, talk enough about all the various services that OMPIC makes available to everyone. I have also noted the issue of counterfeit goods. I am very well aware of the fact that OMPIC is actually carrying out right now a study to update the impact of counterfeit goods on the Moroccan economy. So in my opinion, I think it's important for everyone to know that we take this extremely seriously. I don't see any questions so far coming from our participants. On the other hand, I have a question for our colleague of OMPIC.
Qui permet avant que
the question is that it's very important that a date and some specific information be provided regarding the possible date of registration. Now, I don't know whether that has any legal value in the framework of the opposition procedure regarding the trade name or trademark in the field of industrial property. Now, François said there's not only the cancellation or radiation procedure, but what kind of recourse does one have against any decision made by OMPIC? So from a legal point of view, what recourse does one have? And what about the possible mediation avenue in order to avoid very high legal costs? So essentially, this question was aimed at colleagues from OMPIC, but of course, if François Kaiser wants to come in, no problem. Okay, let me try and answer your question concerning the date. In fact, that there is a procedure which is directly linked to the 1797 legislation and which has been confirmed by legislation 8313. There is a provision concerning what we call datage, the date. Now, what does it mean? It means that a concept, a creation, or something which is not yet been finalized as such receives a date. Now, this dating is not actually as such a title of industrial property. It just indicates a date relating to the creation or the design, and therefore the holder of this creation or this design can call upon that dating, but it's not as such actually an official industrial property reference. But in case of dispute, yes, you can refer to that date indeed. Let me come in and refer to what is being done in this respect at European level. I'm talking about the dating issue. Now, when we date, when we go for dating, it means you provide a date to the creation. And as the lady from OMPIC just reminded us, this is not something that can be put forward in the case of a problem with third parties. So it will be kept by the office, but in case of previous personal possession, you can use it. For example, you can prove to a judge that before the object has been used, you had a dating procedure, and that means that you can continue exploit that very invention without being considered as a counterfeiter. In other words, you cannot, you know, actually win in terms of it's not really a title which is enforceable against third parties, but you can continue exploiting that concept or invention. Now, some people in the field of intellectual property consider that the property it depends on what the inventor actually does. And in fact, the copyright is born through the creation of an art piece. Now, in the case of what we're talking about, the judge will appreciate how the art piece was developed or how something was created, and the dating can be very useful from that point of view because it actually provides a reference date. Well, thank you. Thank you very much to both of you. The next question was as follows. We heard that the question was about possible mediation services in Morocco in order to avoid very high fees relating to a dispute or to some legal case or legal procedure, legal action that could be very long. I don't know whether some of our colleagues from OMPIC could bring some info on this, shed some light on this. Yes, indeed, there is mediation. We have an arbitration and a mediation center within OMPIC. And precisely this procedure will enable the use of the intellectual property invention in case of dispute to actually deal with the issue. At the moment, this is being coordinated by OMPIC. I understand there is an arbitration center, arbitration and mediation center. Okay, that's clear. Well, I note that we have gone beyond the time allotted, and I certainly wish to actually respect everybody's schedule. But I thought that the pre-diagnosis procedure is very useful, especially for SMEs that would actually like to know more about the intangible property or assets. I wanted to ask whether the services provided by OMPIC are provided on a free basis or do you have to pay a fee? I understand that when a patent is issued in Morocco, it's much cheaper than in the EU, but I believe there are quite a few support measures, so I wanted to ask that question. You also mentioned a tool that comes from the Luxembourg office. I'd like to know more about that. Could you say a few words? Yes, indeed. The so-called pre-diagnosis service is presently a service which is offered for a fee. For a number of years, it was a free service, but we have recently decided to make sure the service is being actually paid for because we have actually improved considerably the pre-diagnostic tool, and we submitted a license with BIPIL, which is the Luxembourg Intellectual Property Office, and they have a solution which is a sort of tool which is very useful for the diagnostic or diagnosis procedure. Now, this solution and the pre-diagnosis which the INPI, the French intellectual property organization, offers is that this approach enables you to have a graphic representation of a given company depending on different aspects. For example, knowledge concerning intellectual property, the production in terms of intellectual property, the management of intellectual property, and the exploitation of the intellectual property by that very company. So this tool enables you to have a visual, a graphic approach, and this gives you an immediate idea on where the company stands regarding intellectual property more specifically. Thus, we have therefore developed this pre-diagnosis offer, and this is now a service for which one needs to pay, but I believe that the reduced tariff, the reduced fee is approximately 250 euros. Now, considering the value of what is offered, it's worthwhile, I believe, because it will also give you some information on the different trends and on a very issue chosen by the customer. We also have information concerning the results of a SWOT analysis on the technological trends. And generally speaking, you also receive some recommendations on behalf of OMPIC. Thus, this is indeed a very, very complete service that you offer. Now, I note that I'm now going to put forward a question presented by a participant. It says, hello, thank you for your presentation. I'd like to know whether access to property which is already being marketed is possible on a given platform. The idea is to check whether there are cases of similar products or whether that very intellectual property is already available on your market. Mr. Kaiser. Yes, I believe here we are making a reference to the database which are actually managed by OMPIC. Yes, obviously you can find a database within OMPIC concerning all the patents that are represented on the Moroccan market. So this is free of access. I think there's no problem. And this is a very genuine question. If you're interested in actually applying for filing, you want to check what other patents in the same area are validated in Morocco, whether European patents or PCT patents. And of course, you will look at the different types of patents. Now, the patents that are already over 20 years old are purposeless because they have actually fallen in public domain, but you need to check maybe whether any rights still need to be paid. So generally speaking, there are different searches using keywords you might do. You will actually check the international patent classification to check whether similar technologies are being protected on the Moroccan territory. So this is what I can answer. I'm not sure that was the gist of the question or not. I just wanted to add and say that OMPIC has a service which I mentioned earlier. It's a sort of a search mechanism. This is often used by pharmaceutical industries, for instance. If a pharmaceutical company wished to actually produce and sell generic products on the Moroccan territory, the idea is to check whether that same product is being protected by a patent. So yes, we have a tool. That tool needs to be paid for. Okay, so not a gratis service. I wish to thank all the participants, and indeed in the chat the person who asked the question says that this was a clear answer to his or her question. So thank you very much. And I'd like to take the last minutes to do some ad. Actually, I suggest that you consult the Africa IP SME Helpdesk, and please consult the sheet, the information sheet which have been developed concerning African countries. So do consult the EU OPI information. And thank you very much to all the participants for having taken part in this webinar. And let me end by saying that I do hope that this was interesting, this was instructive in the field of intellectual property. And as Francois stressed, do call upon the SMEs to invest in this wonderful country. I don't know whether our colleagues from OMPIC or whether Francois from INPI want to come in, but as far as I'm concerned, let me wish you a very nice day.